Hello and welcome to the Arsenal Women Arsecast on Arseblog.com with me, your host Tim Stillman, looking ahead to Saturday's Champions League final. That's right, Champions League final against Barcelona in Lisbon. And as ever, joined by our co-host Jamie Spanger to talk a little bit about this game. In the second half, we're going to hear from formerly of this parish, actually, Alex Ibaceta, who moved out to Barcelona last summer and covers them quite a lot. So we'll get her perspective and the Barcelona perspective in part 2. But, Jamie, Champions League final, Arsenal, how good does that sound?
Tim, I'm absolutely ecstatic. I feel like a kid on Christmas, like I'm counting down every night that passes. I'm like one night closer to Lisbon. To be honest, Tim, the last fortnight I've just been so excited to be going. And now I've hit a point this morning, as of Tuesday morning, where I'm like, okay, the nerves are coming in a little bit. We're playing a Champions League final. But Tim, I'm so good. I'm over the moon and I'm very, very excited for Lisbon.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of the same here. I think also like, I kind of parked things a little bit for a few days after the Manchester United game, and I think the players had some time off at the end of last week. We'll talk a little bit about like their preparation and stuff, and it felt like it was quiet, but now this week, and I think, I mean, particularly for me as well, the men's team kind of getting done the admin they needed to do on Sunday, and now it's like really full steam ahead to this. This is really coming into the picture, and doing stuff like digging out my passport and stuff like that is starting to come to the fore a little bit. But the way we're going to do this is we just ask for some questions on Blue Sky, and we'll do questions a little bit around the game. But one piece of news: Arsenal have been Arsenal are a quiet club anyway, but they have been pretty quiet over the last few days. But one piece of news we have had just a couple of hours before recording this is Freda Maanum signing a new contract. I don't think her contract was up, so that's I think a real mutual expression of faith. Your thoughts on Freda signing up?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a statement of intent on what Renee Slegers sees this midfield and the midfield group being, because, last season we saw Victoria Pelova at her very best. That meant that Freda Maanum was struggling to get into the squad after a really good year in 2022-23. So it does obviously seem that Freda is her preferred 10. She's her preferred midfield group starter, depending on who kind of comes in behind her. It feels like Freda's a part of that group, and I feel Arsenal, Tim, you put out a post on, I think it was Blue Sky or X, I'm not sure, that I agree with. There's a core now of mid-20s players at Arsenal, and Freda Maanum is definitely one of them. So for me, it feels like Renee Slegers has chosen Freda as one of the players she really wants to be a big part and build her team around this Arsenal team. So I think I've seen it coming, because Freda has been preferred in the big games against a lot of the top teams in the UWCL in the Champions League. So this is something that didn't surprise me. I'm excited about it because I do think Freda's a bit of a player that you need to put trust into. She's only missed one match day squad, and that was the game after the incident at Molineux, where she obviously had that medical scare. That's the only match day squad she's missed since joining Arsenal. So it's nice that there's a place for her, and it feels like Renee trusts her, and I think she needs that support to be able to thrive.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is a core of players like Russo, like Emily Fox, like Daphne Van Domselaar that I think the club would like to tie down, going more towards their 30s. And yeah, I think she plays every game, basically. I think Arsenal need to add there as well, particularly if Rosa Kafaji does go out on loan, which I think is quite likely. Mariona, is she considered a central midfielder long term and not a number 10? If so, then perhaps numbers have diminished there slightly, which probably does need addressing, not least because I don't really want to see Leslie Russo play there anymore either. But definitely well on board with keeping Freda into that's not a Freudian slip, I promise, or a Freudian slip into her peak years. But there's the small matter of a Champions League final against Barcelona. Barcelona have won the last few games 4-0, 6-0, 9-0, beaten Chelsea 4-1 twice. So obviously they're in horrible form. And that makes things very nice for us. Let's start with this question from Blue Sky at Ironline, because I think this gets us into the conversation. Do you think Renee will pull something different for Barca, or will it be the usual lineup and the usual subs? What do you reckon?
That's a loaded question. I'm just going to preface this with the fact that I would like to be anyone else right now than Renee Slegers having to kind of look to this Barcelona game because, she's spoken a lot about the Arsenal way and how she wants to play football the Arsenal way. And we did see that against Lyon. She didn't actually bend. It just happened to be the fact that Joe Montemurro altered the game and the lineup into Renee's hands. I don't think she changed anything drastic. It's more the micro changes. She's not going into these games against top teams and changing her lineup drastically. So it's hard because you need to balance it in a game with Barcelona where you want to play the Arsenal way. And she's been so firm about that, Tim. She wants to play the football that Arsenal want to play. However, you're coming up against Barcelona where their entire squad is world class. Like, there are very few players in that squad that wouldn't start for every other team in the world. So there's going to have to be a little bit of bend. She's going to have to bend somewhere. She's going to have to compromise in areas that she wouldn't usually prefer to compromise. And I think if she goes out against Barcelona and plays this starting 11 that she's clearly preferred, we saw the starting 11 with the midfield pivot of Kim and Mariona. I do think that is just nonsensical because, you want to play your football, but it's Barcelona. You look at their midfield, it's Bonmati, it's Patry, it's Pateas. These aren't the players that you're playing up against in the WSL, even the Lyon midfield. It's nothing close to this midfield. There's 3 Ballon d'Ors in that midfield group. So it's going to have to be a bit of both. She's going to have to want to stick with the game plan in terms of playing the Arsenal football, while also I think she's going to have to cater the lineup and the midfield group against Barcelona. In my opinion, I think this preferred lineup is going to be a scary decision to make. I don't think she should do that, especially in the back line. I would love to see a back 3 with wing backs. I think I'd like to see 3 centre backs and have Emily Fox out on the right, Katie McCabe out on the left, and then whether you want to then play Leah Volti as well and go full defensive, play Mariona up higher. I would love to see Steph, Leah, and Lotte Wubben-Moy in the midfield 3 group, and I'd play 2 wing backs. It's hard because then you're bringing in a player like Lotte Wubben-Moy who hasn't had a massive season. She's been injury riddled. Do you bring in like Kadina, who's also not been making the squad? So Arsenal don't really have the means to change make wholesale changes, but there needs to be an area of compromise, whether it's in the back 4 into a back 5, or whether it's you start with a deeper, more defensive midfield pivot of maybe Kim and Leah Volti and push on Mariona Caldentey. But I don't think Renee is silly enough to say we're going to play our lineup, because that midfield against the front 3, you've got Eva Pajor, Claudia Pina, Graham Hansen. Like, there's going to have to be a stopper, and you're going to have to bend at some stage.
Yeah, it's really interesting because definitely stylistically, the reality of playing Barca is you will be forced to play a different way. You'll be forced to play without the ball. You'll be forced to rely on your shape, out of possession a lot, and it's really, really tough. There are probably a couple of questions. There's definitely the question: could you go to a back 3? Arsenal have the players to do that. They have the centre backs certainly to do that. They have enough depth there. They have enough depth at fullback to become wing backs as well. But I just think, knowing Renee, I think Renee is very... I've got into the thinking of considering her a bit like Serena Wiegman, and it was the same, particularly the second half of her stint in Netherlands and then with England, and you think she could do this, she could do this, she could do this, and then the lineup drops and it's the same lineup that it usually is. But I think potentially the questions are the discussion we had before the Lyon game about what do you do with that third midfielder. Do you keep it as Freda? Do you push Mariona higher up? And do you play someone like Kyra Cooney-Cross or Leah Volti? And then there's probably a question, which 2 of the 3 wingers starts between Chloe Kelly, Beth Mead and Caitlin Ford. I think it'll be Chloe Kelly and Caitlin Ford. I'd be very surprised if it wasn't. So those are the questions we might ask. And, should Lotte play at centre-half instead of Steph Catley to give Arsenal a bit more presence there, particularly because Barca really do have a focal point now in Eva Pajor, but I think it's going to be the lineup. I think Steph Catley is going to start centre half. I do think it'll be Kim Little and Mariona. I think if there are any tweaks, they'll be slightly positional, how we press. Like you said, that's what we did Lyon. The personnel didn't change, but like the way Arsenal pressed kind of changed. So personally, I think Renee will stick with the lineup. How that manifests itself strategically and tactically, I think is not the more interesting discussion, but it's more likely the discussion we're going to have, I think, after the lineups drop. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, this one's obviously similar. It's from at HRB2908. It is what would your starting 11 be? I feel like we've discussed that. But what strengths do you think we need on the pitch to maximize our chances of winning?
Yeah, so if it was me choosing the starting lineup, I think I would pick Lotta alongside Leah Williamson at centre half. I think I'd have a think about that midfield three, although I do have a bit of a feeling for Freda in this game. And I think that what that feeling is based on is to beat Barcelona, you have to be perfect and lucky at the same time. And I kind of think when I look at how Lyon beat them 2 years ago, Lyon played really, really well, had a really good game plan, but ultimately Amandine Henry smashed one in from 30 yards into the top corner. And I do think there's an element to which if Arsenal are going to win this game, someone's going to have to break the back of the net from 25 yards. And so I'm kind of reluctant to take Freda out. I also think the way Arsenal press will be very, very important, because I think if you sit back on Barca and try and win the lottery, it's probably not going to happen. You look at the games, they've lost 3 games this season. Levante, when they lost, that's your once every 5 years game. They had 150 shots and only one of them went in, and Levante had no shots and scored 2 goals. Just that complete freak game. Whereas Real Madrid and Man City did manage to do them on the counter, did press them quite well. And then, a player like Caroline Weir smashes one in. I think Miedema scored for City against Barcelona. That's what you need. And I think that's much more likely to be a blueprint. So I think the only change I'd definitely make is Lotta. But I do have a bit of a feeling about maybe we should be putting someone like Leo Volti or Kyra Cooney-Cross in the midfield double pivot. That's the one I waver on and that I'm unsure about. You've kind of said, that you'd go to a back three. So why don't I ask you this one? And it's from @Loza93. Building on the kind of the back three idea, but back three with wing backs. So it's not just always a back five. I've watched Barca a lot this season. They've been done 2 or 3 times by low blocks plus a counter-attacking goal. Is this the game plan we need to aim for, or is it too risky to try to sit back for 90 minutes? So in your back three with wing backs, how do you envisage that working?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting question, because if Barcelona are to be broken apart, I completely agree. It's in the counter attack, but it's also in and behind the play. That's why in this lineup, it has to be Chloe Kelly and Caitlin Ford. They're the quickest ones with pace. I think that they can take it to that Barcelona back four. In terms of how, sitting in a low block, like you said, Tim, I don't know if it's completely a safe way to play football, purely because of the caliber of the Barcelona players. You look at, again, if you watch the second leg of the Chelsea-Barcelona semi-final, Claudia Pina rips one from the edge of the box, top corner, and that's when Chelsea is sitting back very deep. Barcelona are playing the ball around. Alexia Putellas gives it to Pina and she hits a miracle strike. But it's not even a miracle strike because she's so good on the ball. So there's an element of the fact that I think the low block is too risky, but the wing backs are so important in terms of overloading those fullbacks. And I think if I were to pick a weakness in the Barcelona squad, it's hard to even say a weakness. It's going to be that area in and behind, because I think that if you rattle players like Onabatye enough, maybe get them on an early yellow card, I think there's a lot of space there for Caitlin Ford to be able to take that territory. And it's funny you say the thing about Freda Maanum, Tim, because I was speaking to Tom Ma earlier on the Halfway Line show, and I was saying if a player is going to score, it's going to be Freda Maanum. I think she's just going to hit one. And I feel like I spend too much time with you now, Tim, because I had the exact same thought and I relayed it on as well. So I think there's a lot of room in the channels, and that's why I'd go with the back five, because Katie McCabe is so good. In terms of shot creation, in terms of final third action, she's one of the best in the WSL, statistically and actually theoretically. She's a phenomenal player in terms of entering the area. So I think that left side with Caitlin Ford up against Onabatye, there's a real chance for Arsenal to take some meat out of that battle, because I think if you rattle her enough, you get her on a card, Arsenal then, not a low block, sit in a mid block, have the ability to use those fullbacks to just overload the Barcelona back four, because they will play a back four, and then you get in and around them. So I think there's space there, and I don't think it's just luck. I think there is space there for Arsenal to actually outplay Barcelona, because I think it's the only place in the pitch that they'll be able to do it. So you're going to have luck in terms of the fact that you need to pick your moments, and something needs to hit a bar or go in off a deflection. However, I do think there's a vulnerability there, and I think Arsenal have the players to be able to capitalize on it.
Yeah, and if you went with the back five, for example, you could invert Katie McCabe into midfield a little bit and have like Steph tuck in behind her in certain phases of play to create that extra midfielder. So I wouldn't be against it. I think the reality is I'm not sure there are any good ideas when it comes to playing Barca. But have you got a question for me?
Yes, I've got this one from Seri X Me. So basically, this is a long one, but there is a point to it. It says, following recent results, even including the United game, should we fear getting hammered by Barcelona in the final? Or is there a Champions League Arsenal that can do the Lyon against Barca? More technically, how would you explain shipping the 12 goals in the last 3 games of the season and losing those 2 right after Lyon? And how do we tighten up against Barcelona?
To the first question, should we fear getting a hammering? Let's be honest. Yeah, could happen. It could happen. Like, Barca are that good. They played Chelsea in the final 4 years ago and they're 4-0 up after half an hour. They can do that to you. They can. Doesn't mean they will, but they can. They are very capable, and I think that's more a reflection on them than it is on us. But yeah, when it comes to the way Arsenal have been exposed, I guess I worry about that specifically slightly less, because we were playing teams who wanted to give us the ball and catch us on the counter, and we are susceptible to that. And I don't think there might be phases where Barca can do that, but I don't think it, and they could, like they absolutely could do that, but I don't think it's going to be their game plan per se. That the thing about Barca that makes them so formidable and makes them so unique is they can do everything. They can pass you to death. They can press you to death. They've got really speedy wingers on the outside. They can run you, and they've got Eva Pajor up front. And they could, if they wanted to, they could spam crosses into her. Don't think they will, but they could, and that would be just as viable a tactic. Like, they do everything in an attacking sense. They do everything excellently. They have so many threats, and they can get you any number of ways on the day. So you can really focus on their technical side and say, we're going to go for that and we're going to be aggressive. But they can just switch the ball to like Fridolina Rolfo, or if they play Salma, and they can run you as well. Ona Barche can run you like that. That's what's so unique and so difficult about them. However, I don't see this being like the Brighton and Villa games. I don't see Barca doing what United did and playing like 2 really rapid players up front and lobbing the ball over the top to them. So I don't necessarily. And there's a reality that we are going to be without the ball, but therefore we should be in shape a little bit more. We've been caught against, Brighton, Villa, West Ham, Liverpool, because we have all the ball and we're attacking and we're out of shape. So whereas the shape defensively hopefully should be better, but probably because we're not going to have the ball. So I worry slightly less about that specific tactic, but they could do it. They could do it because they are good enough. Like, if we go forward once and they take the ball off us, they could do that. They really could. So I guess it's more like, I'm not worried about that one specific thing. I'm worried about the 4 or 5 other things they can do brilliantly as well, quite frankly. How about this one then? Let's slightly change things up in terms of, for a moment, perhaps not looking at the tactical side of this. But this was an interesting question from Dan at D Powell. After all the Jim Ratcliffe stuff at the weekend, so him not going to the Women's FA Cup final, even though United men weren't even playing, I think Jim Ratcliffe's position on the women's team is crystal clear by now. Does it matter to you, for you, who is there from the Arsenal hierarchy?
Look, I think there's elements to why this Sir Jim story is taking so much like room in the press and in fan conversation. I think it's different to, let's say, an owner is to not go to a game and that happens, and you say, okay, that's happening. For an owner then to go and do private interviews on like the BBC, Sky Sports, to club fanzines and say like the women's team is our secondary priority. Like, it's a lot different when he's going and publicly saying, I'm not caring about the women's team until we saw our men's team. They make this amount of money. They don't profit. They're a loss to us. And basically, like, he's doubled down on everything he said. Like, the first interview is crap, but then you almost think, okay, you're going to overcorrect that, and like that's just a really like an ignorant comment. But then he's gone successively, and I don't know if anyone's seen his interview with Gary Neville. I think it was Sky Sports. It was just genuinely atrocious. The guy doesn't even seem like he's really knows like where he is and what he's talking about. So then to not go and represent the club at an FA Cup final last year, the men were playing at Old Trafford. They're playing Arsenal. They lost. This year, 2 days prior to the FA Cup final, he was at Stamford Bridge watching the men's team play Chelsea, losing again. And then he's making a point of not coming to Wembley. So I think there's context there that is why his absence is so sorely felt, because it's almost like he's doing it spitefully and with so much intent, just to basically say, I don't care about the women's team. We don't then have conversations about other club owners. If we don't have a club owner at an Arsenal game, we're not saying, oh, where's Kroenke? Like, why is he not here? Because he's not come out and said, oh, the women's team don't matter to me. So I think there's context around the Sir Jim things. I think people have a magnifying glass, and rightfully so, because he's basically said, we don't care about the women's team. And a lot of, the owners' actions come through investment. They come through transfer market activity. They come through marketing to the club. Obviously, Arsenal are now playing at the Emirates. It's things like that it's visibility in the women's game that proves that the owners have intent, so you need them less. Whereas when it's Sir Jim and he's not doing anything and then he's not coming, it's a different ballpark. I don't think it's the same conversation.
Yeah, I think that's well said, actually. I don't think... I know Chelsea are in the news because of like some investment that they've got, but I don't think people would have asked, was Todd Bowley there? Well, I think he was anyway, but I don't think people would have asked because it's not really a story. I'd have to say, from my own point of view, I'd be a bit disappointed if Josh wasn't there. Mm-hmm. He and Vinay did go to the Wolfsburg away semi-final 2 years ago, so I think I'd expect him to be there, particularly with nothing riding on the Southampton game. I know Richard Garlick is going to be there, and as he should, he has like the women's team as part of his portfolio. He has oversight over that, so I definitely know he's going to be there with obviously Claire Wheatley. I don't know about Josh yet. I hope he is. I think he should be. Have you got a question for me?
I do. This one is from @NixClips72. Thinking of our Champions League campaign as a whole up to this point, who has been our most important player and why?
Yeah, I think this is all. I had this as well. This is almost like the player of the season discussion in that the probably the same names come up. Mariona, mm-hmm. I think is probably the answer to that, because again, Lyon, semi-final, Arsenal are playing well, but she's the one that sticks it in the top corner to put us ahead. When I think back to Real Madrid as well, her and Russo, who also figure in this conversation, like really took that game by the scruff of the neck, but she really, really did. That header she scores, it's not a Mariona goal, but it's a kind of, I'm going to make the difference here type goal, and I'm her goal. I think someone much younger than me might say. And then there's obviously Daphne. I think Van Domselaar. I think the fact that Arsenal basically played her injured in Lyon tells you quite a lot. But I'd say Mariona because, Lyon, Real Madrid quarterfinal, but also I think probably the best performance in the group stage was that Juventus away game. And she ran that. She completely ran that game. Juventus played a player-for-player kind of pressing approach, and Mariona will beat her opponent every time. And she was really the one that kind of stepped up at that point and really took them apart. So I'd probably say Mariona, with honourable mentions for Russo, Daphne Van Domselaar. You'd have to say Emily Fox as well, not just because she's really good, but the fact there's no cover there. I really don't know who would have been playing at right back, to be honest, had she not been there. What do you reckon on that one?
Yeah, I think it goes without saying it would be Mariona. And I want to preface that with another backup question to you, Tim, because she's definitely my player of the season. She's my player of the Champions League. She just makes things happen at a time where Arsenal need a moment of magic in order to kind of kickstart their momentum. But this is obviously, she's playing against her old side. She's playing against Barcelona. No one knows Mariona Caldentey more than Barcelona. It was quite funny. After the Chelsea game, I heard from a few journalists that remained at Stamford Bridge that they could hear the Barcelona players in the change room celebrate every time Arsenal scored against Lyon. So I don't know if that's whether we'd rather play Arsenal or cheering for an old mate. But Tim, are you worried at all about that?
I think it might make her more motivated. But I don't quite. I think for most of these players that wouldn't be an issue, and I think for her, like, I just think athletes at that level I just don't think it's a problem for them. So no, I'm not really. I know she gave some interviews to kind of Spanish press, talking to people like Maria Chicas, saying like she won't celebrate if she scores. I hope we get to find out.
Yeah.
And look, if she scores the winner, I don't care how she celebrates. I don't care if she apologizes and cries her eyes out, quite frankly. But no, I don't worry about that at all. I think it'll be very special for her, actually. And I like to think the Barcelona players felt that too, and that's why they were cheering. How about this one then? And this is related to some kind of discussion we were having earlier. What are Arsenal's chances of outplaying Barcelona's midfield like they did Lyon's? And sorry, I should have said this from Naomi Gurner. Don't think that that's the poster's real name, at Silence Wedge. A related question tacked on, and a related question is whichever gay Arsenal witch girly that hexed Lyon so successfully taking donations. So perhaps we'll leave that question and ask more about the midfield, because I think Patry, Bonmati and Alexia, that's a bit of a different proposition, I think.
Yeah, certainly, Tim. I don't even think this is a question that we need to dive into too deeply. Like we said after the second leg, the Lyon game, obviously Joe Montemuro, like, he was kind of the reason for Lyon's downfall, and the fact that he messed up the midfield by dropping Dermine into the midfield, and then you're playing Hegerberg. Like, he wrote those issues for himself. It allowed Arsenal to have the control. It was a slower midfield, it was a less physical midfield. These three in this Barcelona team have it all. They've got everything in their game. Like you said earlier, Tim, the issue with Barcelona is they're good at everything, but I think Patry is the best CDM in the world by a far margin. Bonmati and Pateas have 3 Ballon d'Ors between them. Like, that's ridiculous. They've got 100 goal involvements between them this season alone. So it's going to not be the same as the Lyon game, in the fact that the caliber of players are the best 3 players in the world right now. I think Patry should be a shout for the Ballon d'Or. If not, Pateas has had an unbelievable season. Out of the 3 of them, Bonmati's probably been the most out of form. So that kind of gives you a sense of this midfield. For Arsenal, it's about managing the press across the 11 players. I don't think it's just about winning the midfield battle. I think it's a lot more than that. I like the back 5 idea. You said it earlier, Tim, in terms of Katie McCabe can provide some sort of overload when Arsenal are in possession. That's very helpful, because these 3 players, as much as you think that they're technical goddesses, they're also very good defensively. Mm-hmm. So you can't just kind of win back possession and then play against them. You need to be able to win back possession and still have a press. So yeah, it's not going to be the same game. These are 3 of the best players in the entire world right now. It's about the whole team. It's like you're playing Arsenal, the whole 11 need to be in absolute like god mode for 120 minutes, let's hope, or 90 minutes in a victory sense. But there needs to be a joint press to be able to beat this midfield. It's not going to be 3v3 at all.
Yeah, and one of the things, we'll speak to Alex Ibaceta in a minute. One thing she was talking about was now they've got Eva Pajor. Like last season, Alexia and Bonmati were perhaps pushing on a bit more because there was more of a goal scoring impetus. They're still scoring sack loads of goals, but that now that Eva Pajor's there, Alex was kind of saying they really do just kind of very much operate as a tight 3, whereas last season one of them was bombing on quite a bit more. So yeah, that's quite sobering. Let's do one more question each. I've got one at the end that's, hopefully quite positive one.
Okay, I might not ask this one because it might be the one you're going to ask, so I'll move on. I'll move on to another one. That was actually my last question. I have faith that they're different. Is it from 5, Tim?
It was going to be the favourite moment of the
Oh, no, let
UWCL
me
run.
ask this one then, and
Okay.
then we'll do your one. So this is from Clive B.
Mhm.
What do you think we need to do to come away feeling happy with the result? Will only a win do, or would just a close score be enough, as we can see this as just a stepping stone for next season?
Yeah, I think looking at the reality, obviously nobody will be happy with the defeat if it's like what in many ways losing 1-0 or 2-1 would probably be worse, because you'd feel quite a bit closer to them. I think I'm going into this game with my eyes open and understanding, and what I'd like to see is just to like close the margins as much as we can. And after that, like I said, there's going to have to be luck. There's going to have to be luck, like whether you like it or not. Man City, I think, pulled off the best performance against Barca this season, and they were still a bit lucky. Like there's a reality that Barca have to miss some chances, and yeah, you have to lean into that. So what I'd like to see us do is like keep those margins really, really close as we can. And if we're not lucky, fair enough. I don't want to get battered in this game. Happy is probably too much of a loaded word, but I want a performance. And I think one thing I really have faith in is we've seen Arsenal's top end performance when they're on it is really good. Like they've won 4-1 and 5-1 away at Lyon twice in 18 months. Like I think Barca are another level on from that, but like we can see that we can pull out a performance when we really need to. The reality is that might not be enough still, but so I'd really focus on the level of the performance, closing those margins and coming away thinking maybe if we had a lucky day we might have done it. I don't want to come away thinking we've been absolutely trounced here, quite frankly. Before I go into the last one, there was a question as well from Eric Benz about any insight to how the team is prepping for the final, considering the gap between the end of the WSL season and Barca are still playing. They played their last league game this weekend. Obviously, they've won the league because they always do. They've got the Spanish Cup final after the international break in early June as well. So this is not going to be the end of their season. So on one hand, maybe they'll be tired. And on the other hand, they're still kind of playing games. All I know so far is that Arsenal, the players had a couple of days off, I think, at the end of last week. But things have been quiet. And I think that's right, by the way. So all I can tell you from like a media perspective, they've done like contracted media only. So like no media open day. That's other than like for broadcasters who pay loads and loads of money. Again, that's not a complaint on my part. I completely understand that. I think it's like heads down. We haven't seen training photos. We haven't seen training videos. I think it's been secluded intentionally. Arsenal aren't going to train on the pitch on the Fridays. They have the right to do. They're going to train at London Colney. They always do this for European aways unless they're playing on artificial turf. They train at Colney and then fly in. And that's what they're going to do this time as well. So I think Renee's wanted to keep things really low key, really quiet, and I think that's right. I completely understand that. So that's the only insight I can really give you in terms of preparation because it's been so quiet. This one, I think I've deleted the handle of the person who asked it, unfortunately. But just to finish, your favourite moment of the Champions League run so far, Jamie?
It's been a crazy Champions League campaign, considering it started with a game against Rangers and Atleti Madrid, and now we were in BK Häcken playing Häcken and obviously trailing 1-0 heading into the home leg. Like, it has been a long journey for Arsenal in the Champions League this season. Again, buying away 5-2 loss, and now here we are going to Lisbon. It's crazy to think about. My favourite moment has to be, Tim, when Alessia Russo hits the net at the Emirates to put us up 3-0 against Real Madrid. That was the feeling where I thought, wow, there is no way 3 goals have gone in a matter of minutes, and we've overcome the deficit. And there was a long 30 minutes of regular time left to play in that game, but there was no sense that Arsenal weren't going through. There was no sense that they were losing. It was like a testament to the character of this team, and I think that's what we've seen. It's been belief. This campaign has been built on belief. It's been built on community and family, and the fact that this is one club playing under Renee Slegers and the players are just enjoying their football. And I think that night at the Emirates summed it up for me. And that goal, Alessia Russo, followed by 2 offside goals as well, gotten rid of by VAR. Yeah, it was great. There was tears in my eye in that moment.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those times as well where the Meadow Park atmosphere has translated, I think, to the Emirates. I think everyone understood what was on the line, and it was very easy to get behind, particularly the momentum they created, which leaves me really to pick the Lyon game. I was very fond of the performance in Juventus. It wasn't in Turin; it was 2 hours outside of Turin, but at Juventus away. But I mean, Lyon, I wasn't expecting it. Basically, Real Madrid, I thought we had a good chance. I really did. Lyon, I didn't think we had. I thought we had a chance, but not a big one. I think I said 10%. And that was a brilliant performance and a couple of brilliant goals as well. The Mariona one in particular, then Russo scoring right after half time. That was kind of the mixture of perfect and lucky. I think I was kind of talking about, and really good kind of travelling support as well. Had good night out after that as well with the travelling support, and I think that was, you talk about family, community. That was a big part of it, and I really hope we see that again in Lisbon this weekend. I think there's about 5,000 of the Arsenal allocation sold so far. Unfortunately, I think the airlines have just completely destroyed the pricing and just made it not possible for so many people to go, which I think is a real shame, particularly because I think with the kind of the closer distance between Barcelona and Lisbon, I think there are going to be more Barcelona fans for kind of geographical and financial reasons, unfortunately, which I don't think is a true reflection of both fan bases. But great that Arsenal are doing a screening at the Emirates so that Arsenal fans can get together, and I think that's a big part of the reason they're doing that. But yeah, Jamie, I'll see you in Lisbon.
Tim, I'll see you in Lisbon. Good luck.
Okay, we're going to take a short break here, and after the break, I'm going to be talking to Alex Ibaceta to get the Barcelona perspective. Stay right here. Okay, welcome back to the Arsenal Women Arsecast on Arseblog.com. We've let Jamie go from part 1. For part 2, we obviously wanted to get a bit of a Barcelona perspective. Basically 20 minutes of just saying Barca are really good, I think, but who better to do that with than formerly of this parish, but now living in Barcelona and watching lots of Barcelona, Alex Ibaceta. Alex, how are you doing?
Yeah, it's good. It's good to be back. It's been a while, and a lot of things have changed, and now Arsenal in the Champions League final.
Yeah, indeed. And the other thing that's changed is you've moved to Barcelona. Actually, the last time you were on the podcast was when Arsenal signed Mariona, and you were very effusive about her, and I think it's fair to say that's worked pretty well for Arsenal. But before we kind of get cracking, like what exactly are you doing now in Barcelona? What kind of work?
Basically the same that I was doing in London, but around Barcelona. I've kind of become that person that everyone calls when there's something on match day. Which is kind of what I expected at the end of the day. There's not many other teams here, especially with the men's team doing so well. So there's a lot of kind of interest in the club and interest in going to the games. And obviously you have 2 other Liga F teams here. So it is quite busy in women's football, considering there's 3 first division teams. So you always have games present on the weekend. So it is quite nice. But yeah, I'm doing a bit of everything really. Nothing's changed, but this time just around Barcelona, much less Arsenal.
Awesome. Well, let's maybe start with Mariona. Like I said, you came on the podcast last summer to talk a bit about her. Arsenal.com Player of the Season, Arsenal Women's Supporters Club Player of the Season, WSL Player of the Season. I appreciate you probably don't see Arsenal as much as you used to, but I mean, that move's gone pretty well, right? What's the kind of? I know there's a lot of affection still for Mariona in Barcelona. How have people seen that move from afar?
Yeah, definitely. I've still actually seen Arsenal quite a lot this season because now I get to watch it on YouTube on my TV, being outside of the UK. But no, I think Mariona. I mean, I said it, from the start. She's a one of a kind player. The difference was that at Barcelona you had other players next to her. You had Alex Ibaceta, they speak for themselves. You have Caroline Graham-Hansen next to her, and not to say that Arsenal doesn't have those players, but you do have Alex Ibaceta. Arsenal does have Kim Little, but the kind of focus, especially not footballistically, but media wise, marketing wise, Mariona never had that interest and kind of that focus. So nobody really knew what kind of player she was. And it happened to other players still, like Patrick Jarro, probably the best pivot in the world. Nobody knows about her. Why? Because she's playing next to Alex Ibaceta and Mariona was kind of victim to that. But no, she's obviously proven herself this season, and there's no other way to put it. She is one of the best players you've ever seen play. She's so interesting. She's so unique. The way she plays, the way she thinks, the passes that she filters through on the pitch. Sometimes you just don't really think how did she manage to even see that. And I think at Arsenal, what I like about Renee Slegers particularly, that she's giving Mariona a lot of freedom on the pitch to kind of get to do what she does best. And I think that's really, really interesting. And it's obviously worked for Arsenal. I think we've been saying it to him for the past few seasons. We need that explosive, different player. Every team that we go up against has that one player that has that difference and is quite unique. And I think Mariona's finally that player for us. That has just made everyone elevate their level to the next level. And I think that's, it is hard to say, but I do think that it is, a major part of having Mariona on the pitch. She forces you to be better. She goes into space. You have to think, you have to move, you have to be creative. And I think Arsenal definitely needed a player like that. And yeah, I think she's proven, we haven't even talked about her finishing, her numbers, her in presence, and also she is just a very lovely person. So, she makes you enjoy football. She makes you enjoy playing well without any pressure, without any stress. And I think that's quite special.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Arsenal had creative issues last year. They bought Mariona. They don't have creative issues anymore. Like sometimes, it is just that simple. You just have to go and get that player. But kind of switching it back to Barcelona, last few games, 1-4-0, 1-9-0, 1-6-0, beaten Chelsea 4-1 twice. They're in terrible form, really. But what about, obviously they changed coach with Jonathan Giraldez going to Washington Spirit last summer, and they brought in Per Romeo, and, a very Barcelona appointment, something I think we've seen a lot through with the men's and women's clubs. They don't tend to go for that, Chelsea went for Sonia Bonpastor, USA go for Emma Hayes, Barca tend not to do that. Have there been any subtle changes under him since Jonathan Giraldez? I mean, does it matter who the Barcelona coach is? Could I just go in and say, hey guys, all that stuff you're doing, just keep doing it and we'll be fine? Have there been any changes under him? And like I said, does the coach matter that much for Barca?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. I think it is so easy to kind of look at it that way from an outside perspective, in terms of, these Barcelona get nobodies as their managers and they still go on to win the Champions League. But also the other half of that is that because they're nobodies, they're internally. So, they have instilled the mentality monster. You can't, Chelsea got Sonia Bonpastor because she knows how to win the Champions League and she has that mentality. The US got Emma Hayes because, we all know what kind of mentality Emma Hayes has. So it's kind of the same aspect, but it's a very specific Barcelona mindset that if you have someone externally, it is hard for them. We've seen it in the men, Ronald Koeman, who even had history in Barcelona as a manager, just didn't really have that mindset of being in the same way, of thinking in the same style. And it's just a very particular, club to come into and manage. But I think Bede, for example, from the interviews that I've done this season and the feelers that I've had, he's not changed a lot with Jonathan Giraldez. I think on the pitch has stayed more or less the same. Because I did an interview with Jonathan Giraldes before he left, and he's like, every season we change something on the pitch. One season they prioritize having the fourth midfielder come in from the wing, or having the false nine. When Jenny Hermoso left, Ashisa Oshuala left, they were left with no striker, so they had to fix that false nine, midfield role to kind of compensate for not having a pure striker. Then they did, the fourth midfielder from the wing, for example. So that was quite interesting. And I think Bere actually has kept more or less the same style of play that Jonathan Giraldes left with. But one of the biggest differences that I hear a lot of the players saying is that the intensity in training is just ridiculous now. He is much more competitive than Jonathan Giraldes. So he kind of, there's a word in Spanish, exigencia. Like what he demands from his players is so much more than Jonathan in terms of competitiveness and individual competitiveness. And I think that's changed. But also, one of the biggest things that Bere has done, he's done a lot more rotations than Jonathan. Over there, one of the biggest critiques that Jonathan had, he never rotated players. And now you see a lot of the youth players coming in, Vicky Lopez, Sydney. I'm not even going to try to pronounce her name right now because it's not coming to my head. You have Alba Caño. You have a lot more youth players coming through the ranks in the first team, much more than Jonathan Giraldes. So I think Bere has also been key to kind of rotating the players. I did an interview with Caroline Graham-Hansen, and she's like, the staff have done really well to listen to us because, their pre-season and their recovery into the season is kind of at the beginning of the season because, these players, especially the ones that play in the national team, don't have breaks. It's going to happen again this summer. Especially Barcelona, Arsenal have finished the WCL already and they have the Champions League. Barcelona they just finished
the cup final, right?
They just finished the season this past weekend. They have the Champions final. They have international break, and then they come back to play the cup final, and then they have 2 weeks before they have to go into the national team ahead of the Euros. So essentially throughout this entire season they only have 2 weeks break. You go to the Euros, if you go far, you come back and then you have to do a pre-season tour and all that. So one of the biggest differences in Bere of what the players have said is that he's kind of respected fatigue and listening to the players a lot more. I think we've seen a lot of players out the season for quite some time without necessarily having the pressure of coming back. Caroline Graham-Hansen being one of them. So I think she personally kind of felt that way. So, it's a lot of tactics and listening, but the key things I think are the intensity that he puts in, but also the listening to his players, because he's a very quiet coach, I think, as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting, about the schedule and perhaps just changing the stimulus a little bit. But, you mentioned there, I think that's one of the most interesting things about Barca over the years is kind of what they do with that centre-forward role. Because, like you said, it was Jenny Hermoso for years, then they had Oshuala, and then, you're talking about that fourth midfielder. It is usually Mariona from one position or another, whether she was coming from the 9 or the left wing. But And perhaps since Jenny Hermoso left, it's been the one thing people have asked about Barcelona. Like, obviously, they get so many goals from so many different areas, but do they have that kind of, penalty box striker? And then they went and bought Eva Pajor from Wolfsburg. So they very much do have that now. I mean, what kind of difference has that made? Like, obviously, she's scored quite a lot of goals this season, but has that just given them maybe like another little edge in attack?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you kind of see the effect of that as well. You see Alex Ibaceta, Saidano scoring a lot less than what they did. Nevertheless, Alexia came out, top scorer of the league this season. So it is kind of a shift because now you have Eva Pajor coming out, Pichichi. I think Alexia was the Pichichi of the team in one season because of that role, because there was no pure striker. So what had needed to happen? Well, Alexia needed to step up. Aitana needed to step up into the box. Different players needed to score because if not, the goals weren't going to come. But now you have Eva Pajor. Alexia can step back. Aitana can step back, and that kind of goes well. Eva Pajor has probably had one of the best seasons of her career, and it's her first season at Barcelona. Not many people can say that their best season is their first season at a club like Barcelona. She's hit the ground running. If I remember correctly, I think it was like 6 goals in her first 7 games for Barcelona, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. It obviously helps. She's played with Caroline Graham-Hansen at Wolfsburg before. She's played with Freda Rodolfo at Wolfsburg before. She's played with Ingrid Engen, but particularly Rodolfo and Garo, who are on the wings, they understand. Eva Pajor likes to talk about her spaces are so minimized now. That's probably one of the the biggest things, because Wolfsburg particularly likes to run the players. You have Eva Pajor, Jule Brands, Jan Stontier. They had it at one point. These players with long legs, fast legs. So their idea was to go into space, but now Barcelona obviously don't do that. So Eva Pajor has had to think ahead, and she's always said that one of the most impressive things with Barcelona players is that their innate knowledge to know where everything is and know where to put the ball even before they receive the ball. And Eva Pajor has had to kind of progress in that sense. But yeah, Eva Pajor has probably made the biggest difference to the team. They've made a lot of signings, but I think that's probably their best signing of the summer.
And one player they lost in January, Kiera Walsh. I think everyone knew for a little while that she was there was never any question of a contract extension or anything like that. She was always going to go. At one point, Arsenal were very, very much interested, but that's a deal that could have happened last summer. That didn't. But obviously, she went in January to Chelsea. Now, like you said, with Alex Ibaceta fit again after the ACL, Bonmati, Patry, they're okay in midfield. But I think even a player like Kiera Walsh, they're okay. They can cover for that. And Ingrid Engen there as well, who can play that position. But I guess what was the and because I think as well, as soon as she left, there was a defeat to Levante in the league, which was this massive shock. But what was the thinking, with Barcelona fans in particular about letting a player like Kiera go, but to a team who ostensibly really looked like they were going to challenge for the Champions League this year, and kind of coping with the loss of Kiera Walsh. But, was there any surprise that Barcelona did that?
I think because you mentioned there that there's, it's been rumored for a really long time that Kiera's wanted to leave. So I think the fans have kind of mentalized for it happening. That once it happened, it wasn't necessarily a surprise. Was this a surprise that she went to Chelsea? Probably not really, because that's where they pay. I think most fans would see it as probably a bit more bitter, because you see it from the outside and you can really say, right, she's selling out this club to go for somewhere with money. And it is, I'm not going to say it's true, I'm not going to say it's false, but from the outside, that is what it looked like. But you don't want, there is videos of her in the celebration of the trophy. She wasn't in it anymore. She wasn't in the mental side of enjoying the football and enjoying being at the club. You could tell she wanted out. And I think most fans really reacted in the sense that if she doesn't want to be here, then, let her go. So I think there wasn't as much negative reaction to that, because I think most players wanted, most fans, not players, most fans wanted that, and they kind of felt that. So, when you have Patry, you have Ingrid Engen, you're not going to miss Kiera Walsh. She is one of the best players in the world in her position, but, Barcelona don't have a necessity to keep her on, because you do have other players that are equally as good as her.
And in terms of, obviously Arsenal face an enormous task this weekend. They're going to be massive underdogs. I think everyone understands that. But I'm looking at, Barca have lost 3 games this season, right? I think I take the Levante one out, because I think the Levante game is one of those games that probably happens every 4 or 5 years, where you have 100 shots or whatever and you just don't win. So I don't think that's a template for Arsenal, but maybe the defeat against Real Madrid and the defeats against Manchester City. I wondered if there were common themes between those, and whether you think Arsenal have any weapons that, like Barca, don't have many weaknesses, if any, but that whether Arsenal have something that maybe Barca might be susceptible, particularly looking at the way they lost the Real Madrid and Man City games. And obviously they beat both those opponents as well this season. So again, it's still, you've still got to be very lucky, even if you're very good.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, it's one of those. It's quite interesting, because obviously they lose two games in the season, and it's that's what we focus
Crisis.
on. Their standard is so high that they lose one game, you're like, oof, are you that good? Are you actually that good? And the players just kind of took it on the chin. They're like, we lost 2 games this season, we won 98% of the season, so they understand the critique, but they're also like, you can't like that. And one of the biggest things was like, if you look at those matches, look at the way that we lost. It wasn't a defeat. Also, we lost, playing. And yeah, I think in every single game they had the opportunities. Obviously against Real Madrid, you had the Jana Fernandez goal that was wrongfully ruled offside that would have changed, the momentum of that. And I think, a player like Caroline Weir, who also Arsenal fans know really, really well, to kind of cement that win, I think is, it is Barcelona going up against Caroline Weir in the sense that she scored those important goals. But yeah, it's the common thing was it just not finishing their chances against Real Madrid and against Man City as well. They had the opportunities to put the game to rest. It wasn't like if they were pinned back, not being able to do anything. If anything, it was quite the opposite. They were free to play their game, but the opposition took their chances and Barcelona didn't. I think that's one of the biggest things that Barcelona had suffered with in the past. Not recent years, but if you look at, before they were kind of the big powerhouse that they are now, one of the biggest things was not finishing the chances that they created. You look at that Lyon final back when in Gothenburg, and that was probably one of their biggest problems. And yeah, it's one of those things. It is interesting. I thought Chelsea's second leg was probably the most uncomfortable that I've seen Barcelona this entire season. Those two losses weren't the most uncomfortable that I've seen them. I thought they were quite comfortable. They were frustrated, definitely, but I thought they were quite comfortable in being able to play their game. I think Chelsea in the second leg did actually pretty well to put them on the back foot, but that didn't do anything.
No.
That didn't do anything. Chelsea were dominant in the first half, but I don't know what Mathieu said. I have one chance, I'm going to score it in a spectacular way. So that says a lot about Barcelona. I think Arsenal also have the same strengths that Barcelona have. I think they could do similar to, we're not gonna say that we're comparing them to Chelsea, but I genuinely do think that Chelsea did the right game plan. They just weren't able to create as much. But I think Arsenal have a bit more dynamic movement, particularly in the midfields, than Chelsea. And it'll be interesting, two teams that are possession based. Going to be a battle for possession, and it's going to be a battle in key moments. Mariona is obviously going to be key to kind of the movement behind that, but I think Barcelona had a very similar style of player that their fullbacks like to go up and attack. So if Barcelona have that winger, can Chloe Kelly, can Clayton Ford, can Mario kind of exploit those spaces? I think is going to be probably one of the key things. I would really like to see Alessia Lurusso be really, really active against Irene Paredes and Mapi Leon. Because I think she can get on the front foot of a lot of 1v1 battles, particularly against those two. So I think Arsenal have a lot to look forward to, especially in the midfields. You do have Alexia, but Kim Little is very well at recovering ball, at kind of breaking up play. And I think that's one of the key things that Chelsea did. Erin Cuthbert did really well at breaking up play, breaking up possession and recovering a lot of balls. That's probably one of the key things that you need to do to kind of stop Barcelona, essentially, is, break up their play, frustrate them. Again, how effective is it going to be? We saw Chelsea do that and it didn't go. But I think Arsenal have enough players to kind of, do what Chelsea did and do it even better. It is possible, it is Champions League final, but I think that's kind of, sadly to say, Sonia Bonpastor and Chelsea did a really good blueprint in that second leg against Barcelona.
Yeah, the last time Arsenal played Barcelona, I remember Arsenal started quite well, and then Fridolina Rolfo put one in the top corner on her right foot from about 30 yards, and you kind of think, I don't think that was anywhere in the game plan. Yeah, exactly. It's like, I don't think they'd have spent a lot of time on, defend Fridolina Rolfo's right foot, but there's just that level of quality. Just in closing, you talked about Barca have rotated a bit more this season. I still think I could probably pick 10 of their starting lineup, and the one I'm wondering for this game anyway, and the one I'm wondering about what you think will be, do you think they'll start with Salma or Claudia Pina?
It's an interesting one because I think they both offer very different things.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is very much down to their game plan, which none of us really know. Salma offers more width, more 1v1 attack. Claudia Pina offers that more Mariona-esque dynamic role of going to the midfield, of being able to shoot, with the right foot at the top of the box. Salma does really well at crosses. She does really well receiving the ball and attacking space. So it is very much what Barcelona are planning to do. I think Claudia Pina also gives you a bit more defensive security than Salma, even though Salma used to run tracks. So if she has to run down 1v1 with someone, she very much will win it 90% of the time. So it's very dependent on what Bede wants to do. Obviously, if I remember correctly, in Bilbao, Salma did start on the wing. So, maybe it's very, very different this time around. But Claudia Pinas has had probably one of the best seasons of her career. And even at that, Bede hasn't been her biggest fan. He's taken her off quite a lot of time. He hasn't started her a lot of time, but every time she steps on the pitch, she proves herself. So maybe it is, time for Bina, but I wouldn't be surprised if Salma starts, particularly just because of the pattern of the season. And I wouldn't be surprised, as I said, Arsenal do like to do what Barcelona do, the fullbacks go up, they attack. So when you have someone like Salma attacking that space, it's not necessarily a bad thing either. So I wouldn't be surprised if Salma starts. I would particularly like to see Claudia Pina start, personally, just because of that dynamic movement that she gives. I think would be really, really key, and kind of overloading the midfield as well, giving Eva Pajor a bit more space to run into, or Eva Pajor making that run deep and leaving that space for Claudia Pina to run into. But I do think probably Salma would start.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think it would tell us a lot about how Barcelona see Arsenal, because they have been more susceptible through the middle, Arsenal, this season. And I listen, they're both like great players with great qualities, but I kind of think if Claudia, sorry, I don't know why I keep saying Claudia. I think it's because I've seen Claudio Ranieri in the news so much in the last 24 hours, but Claudia Pina, coming into the middle, I think that would scare me slightly more, just because that's where Arsenal have been a bit open. But
yeah,
as with this whole conversation, whatever you do against Barcelona,
whatever
they do.
Yeah, the context of a Champions League final, I think all the players have said the same. Anything can happen at the end, no matter what. I think Arsenal kind of proved that against Lyon as well. Nobody expected Arsenal to do that against Lyon, but it's a one-leg tie, essentially. That second leg, it felt like a final before the final. And anything can happen, and look what happened. So it is, you analyze, you look at the tactics, but it's a final, it's mentality. Underdogs do have nice stories sometimes in a final. So I think it's just going to be so interesting. I think both teams have the quality, but it is, it is scary to go up against Barcelona.
Yeah, I'm scared.
It is frightening. It is frightening, the prospect of thinking about it. But I think Arsenal have every right to kind of put themselves in that same level and have that same mentality of, we beat Lyon, and the way that Arsenal beat Lyon as well. I think they have every right to come into this final and be like, there's no reason why we can't do this.
We'll end on that note, because I think that's as positive as we can get in the conversation about Barcelona. But Alex, thanks so much as ever, and we'll speak to you again next season when Arsenal play Barcelona in the Champions League, no doubt.
Let's see that.
So thanks so much to our current co-host, Jamie, and our former co-host, Alex, for all their insight ahead of Saturday's Champions League final. We will be in Lisbon, obviously. Our videographer, Jason, will be coming out as well, so we'll be doing quite a bit of video content around Lisbon on Friday and Saturday, and we'll bring you everything from Renee's press conference. There'll be a couple of players there as well on Friday evening. The players, they're not going to train on the pitch in Lisbon, but they're going to do like a walk around the pitch, which is going to be open to those of us in the media as well. So we'll bring you everything from all of that, all the good stuff video-wise out in Lisbon. We've got a very special guest lined up to speak to us as well. And we'll do a lot of kind of fan content. Jason and I won't be together in the ground because we couldn't get two of us accredited. So the match day vlog might look slightly different, but Jason will be sat with the Arsenal supporters. So we'll still get really good kind of fan-centered content around the game, as well as all the usual stuff we always do around every single game, no matter what. And Jamie and I will do a post-match podcast for you probably on the Monday when we're both back, which also happens to be my birthday, by the way. So hopefully talking about that game will be a good birthday present. But we'll keep the podcast going during the summer. It might not be weekly. We might switch it to fortnightly. reacts to things that happen, things that don't happen. But we'll keep that going. Obviously, the Arsenal Women's section on Arseblog News will keep going with all the news and things like that. I will take a little bit of time out in the summer, and my plan is to be offline quite a bit more than usual, although I always say that and get sucked back in. But we'll keep all the kind of usual stuff ticking over, but I might take a little bit of time out this summer because I never do that, and I should do that, so I will. But we'll keep everything ticking over, and we'll speak to you. Jamie and myself will speak to you on Monday when Arsenal are again the champions of Europe. So thanks so much, and we'll speak to you then. Take care.